Hi there, Ron here of Variable Play, and welcome to LarongAtin with my special guest, with our special guest, John Brieger. There.
There, other side.
Hello.
Hi everyone. This is
Always
John,
good
Hi.
with these things.
and of course, I am joined by Nico and Sir Freddy.
Hi.
Good evening,
Hello.
everyone. Good morning, super morning. What time in the morning is it now,
Not
John? For
not too
you,
early. We're at 7 a.m.
7 a.m. Okay,
Okay.
so you had to wake up at 6 before
Yeah, to
to
get
get ready for
clearly
the show.
very beautiful for today's show.
Fair enough. Fair enough. For us, we're ending our day. You are about to start
Mhm.
your Wednesday.
Fun,
All
weirdly
right.
enough, we watched the intro loop a couple times. I'm in there.
Yes. Yes, you are. Because of course, for everyone who is not familiar yet, so John helped me make folded
Oh, hey,
wishes.
look, we matched.
Yeah, twinning.
Wait, let me get my copy. It's FOMO.
So yeah, John is my developer working with B&B games, um, and took the design the really far
Yeah.
far theme to where it is today. But we'll get to that in the main proper. So we have a few people already. Hi, Mikey. So feel free for everyone to type in your questions for John.
Yeah.
We
And we know that for a lot of you, even the ones who already have published self-published games here in the Philippines, you don't really know what a developer is.
mm,
So you might have a lot of questions, and just to basically understand what that part of the production or development process is.
Yeah.
yes.
I guess to start with, to introduce myself. Hi, I'm John Brieger, and I work as a board game developer. I run a studio here in Sunnyvale, California, in the U.S., where we help publishers take games from prototype to product. And that includes things like running the playtesting programs, working to see who the audience of the game is, who is going to be buying this game, who's going to be playing this game, and not just trying to make the best game possible, but trying to make the best game for the audience that's going to be playing it. And I think that's something that is so core to my philosophy about development is, and those of you who have worked on your own games, as I'm sure you know, there's no such thing as one best game. It's about making the right game for the people who are going to be playing it. And
Yes.
so, working on Ron's game as an example, which I'm sure we're going to come back to a good amount. The game that we made to for Floyd to release with a primarily United States market is different than maybe if we had done that same development with a Philippines first market in mind. They may have ended up
Right.
with different themes, different types of instructions, and that's okay, and that's expected. That's part of the development process.
Yep. Hi, Birdie. Thanks for joining. And we also have Kyo. Good evening. So, yes, so this is John, and we are talking about the life of a developer. And most, again, in the Philippine context, we are still learning about what it needs to be, what does it take to become a designer. Now, even more so, like, okay, so how do you even get to a developer level? Um, and so Mikey said that quote hits hard. Always audience first. Yes, yes. I think Birdie was he was the one before the show we were talking about some of the local designers. So Birdie's game is hyper focused
Mm-hmm.
on his target audience, and that's why it is a game that works well for that hyper focused target audience. And I think Birdie, you are collaborating with Ivan, one of the contributors here of Variable Play.
Mhm.
So um, we have a few questions
Mhm.
for you,
Uh-oh.
but so Birdie also mentions, I hope to learn how to bring it to abroad. Yes,
Mhm.
we also would like you to succeed. I think it's also something that's going to be very receptive uh, outside. So that would be
Mhm.
cool to see. Um, but before that, for the ones who are in stream and for later, we will just repeat this from time to time. We do have a raffle. So Sir Freddy
Mhm.
was kind enough to uh, share with us. So people who are in the stream and comment and ask questions will uh, win a copy of Folded Wishes.
Mhm.
So we will pick that at the end of the show. Once, if we have time, if not, we will release a separate video. But basically, everybody that has asked the question, do we do the hashtag thing?
Hashtag,
What will be our hashtag? Hashtag
wish ko
folded
lang.
wishes. Hashtag wish ko lang. So let's do hashtag folded wishes. That way we know that you guys want to join the raffle. So we'll pick those names up so on stream. So please do comment from the different streams you guys are in. We'll be able to see it, and then you guys can just contact us for the winner. Good morning, Fred, and good evening. Good morning to John. Good
Yeah.
evening to us. Okay, so
Mhm.
question number one. Hang
Mhm.
on, let me just. So okay, first up, what is a
Mhm.
developer? Like, what do you do in the game design and publishing process, and what's the difference between a game designer?
Um, from in hmm. As I said before, I sort of view as a developer as someone who takes a game from prototype to product, and sometimes that's a formal role, and you might hire someone who explicitly is a developer like me. But for a lot of publishers, your publishing staff will serve in the roles of developers after they've signed a game from a designer, and they'll help shape that game for publication. The things that a developer might do can include working on the theme of the game, working on the usability of the rules, and trying to figure out how to make the game more accessible and more easy to understand and learn to play. It might include running playtesting programs and looking at the results of how customers view the game. It could include designing new content or designing new cards, could include some writing. It is really varied, I think, what a developer does on a game by game basis, because it is so much about who is the publisher, who is the audience that that publisher is trying to reach, and what is the state of the game when it's done by the designer.
Mm-hmm.
In, I think, a lot of other industries other than board games, the role of a developer is really a design role. And if you think about the types of work that a developer does, all of those are things that a designer does at some point in their process as well, right?
Right.
Running playtesting, thinking about how the game works, thinking about how to make it easier to play. But where I think the distinction between the two comes is that a developer has a clear path to market on the
Mm.
title. Know exactly, there is a core vision that's been set by the designer, and we can look at that vision and figure out how to bring that to the audience that's been set by the publisher.
Mhm.
Okay, so those are the
Mhm.
two things that are being connected by the developer. Because as a designer, you're just like, I'm trying to come up with a game. This is my vision for it. But as a publisher, normally publishers would have a target market, or at least they know these are the people that they prefer to sell to, or that it works for them, that they have more success reaching out to that type of market. or that demographic. And as a developer, you're bridging those two sometimes very opposite directions, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
the the designer wants to go this way, but the publisher sees I can sell it here. How do you sort of balance that as like how do you say, okay, that direction is actually, does the publisher always win? Meaning that's where I just need to figure out the path to get there, or do you sometimes also have to propose like different ways or compromise?
I wouldn't say the publisher always wins, though I think the publisher has priority because that is, of course, my boss.
Right.
Uh,
They're the one paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things I think is most people in board game publishing get into making board games because they want to make great games. And if you are a designer and you're talking with your publisher, or in my case, if I'm a developer and I'm talking with my publisher, and I can make a really great case for, they said, hey, it should be this way, and I can say, I've been testing the game. The designer said, I think it should work like this, and I agree. I think that's what's going to make the best game. Uh, Publishers are often open to hearing that feedback as long as it's thoughtful and intentional, that you're putting the players first and not just your own ego.
Right.
So, something that I've been working on recently is I work with a publisher based in the United States called BoardGameTables.com, and
Mhm.
they have signed a couple games from very small Japanese publishers and very indie Japanese games that maybe were produced in runs of 200 or 300 copies in Japan, and have not had a wide release outside of Japan, or sometimes any release outside of Japan. And as an example of sort of this conflict, one of the things that I really like about some of these games is they have there is sometimes additional theme that's in the rules that is sort of poetic in the way it expresses the game. So in a game that's coming up originally called Birth, it's about the birth of a galaxy, and at the beginning it instructs the players to take all the dice and hold them in their hands and imagine the Big Bang, and then roll them onto the table.
Okay.
Now, it is not necessary to play this game to imagine the Big Bang as you roll these dice. But when we looked at the new theme, which is, instead of stars, it's dandelion seeds scattering across a field, you wanted to preserve sort of the poetic nature of that instruction. So now you imagine that you are the seeds of a dandelion blowing in the wind, and roll the dice.
Okay. So you're balancing out the intention of the designer. Like this is, so normally as a designer you have this idea of an experience, and the game and the theme sometimes kind of come after that, but the experience is the first thing that you sort of look into. And as a publisher, you're now seeing, well, this is how it would be appealing. And so if right now, especially the idea of dandelions would appeal more because of how everybody became more plants oriented. In the Philippines it's called plantitos and plantitas. I don't know the term for the US, but every household now has more plants, and people became more plant experts. So maybe that way, that's you also see a lot more board games actually that are collecting plants type of themes. So I think that's where you could see the distance between the galaxy and and Planned Parenthood, where you are. It is, you're right. That's how they spread the new plants. So that is true. Uncle
I,
Plant. Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead, Nico.
Based on what you said earlier. So yeah, we just met. Hi again. I'm Nico. I'm a game designer here in the Philippines, and I also admin the local Unpub group. So yeah, we
Yeah.
used to have a lot of face-to-face play tests before the pandemic. Now, not so much. We try to have it online, but it's not as many as before. Um,
You did
so
the Bagani game, right?
yes, yes. Oh, have you played it?
I have not played it, but
Uh-huh.
Freddie brought a copy to show us when we met
Oh,
a
okay.
couple years ago.
Yeah. That was me. So what I wanted to ask is because here in the Philippines, right, a lot of designers end up having to be their own developers because there's not really that many opportunities, or they want to do their own type of game without really going to a publisher. And I personally, in my experience, I have found it very important when to say design has ended and now we're in development. And in Balangay, so that was our studio. We had a few staff. We would even like, so when someone comes up with a design, we would let another person take over as a developer, so that it's like a fresh set of eyes. A new person is working on this. Um, so, would you have that kind of distinction also? Let's say you're working on a game, you're the designer, you're also going to be the one developing it. Are you going to come up at a stage and say, okay, I'm done with design, I'm now into development, and what would the difference be for you? Because yeah, I have my own. I want to just hear what you think about that.
Yeah, uh, we do that sometimes within my team.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned I run a studio. We have
Mm-hmm.
6 people, 4 here in the U.S. and 2 in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we are the designers of games, or will be called upon, especially when we're making things like sequels to existing games. Is something we commonly will be called into design. And
Mm-hmm.
recently, we're working on more intellectual property games, things with TVs and movies as well.
Mm-hmm.
And often, I think that that transition from when am I done the design to when am I done development, uh, it is a hard thing to know. Some I think I don't know that I can say this is the point, but there are some signs that I think you're getting closer, which is as you play test the game, things are changing less frequently between each
Mm-hmm.
test. You start narrowing down the core. You can identify the things that are the hook and the vision of the game. When people ask you, what do you do in this game,
Mm-hmm.
you can describe what's special, what's amazing, what is going to be the things that people will talk about for your play. And maybe you have a sense of the size, and how big of a game it is. It's probably playable without you in the room. You've probably written
Mm-hmm.
the first rule book, or maybe rule book number 50, who knows, it depends on your
Mm-hmm.
process. uh, I think you want something that, often I would say, if someone put final art on it and published it, you wouldn't cry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I wanted to ask that because what I've seen some designers wherein they have like, okay, so they've brought their game to Unpub, they've made a game design, and it's playing well. It's not done yet, of course, but it's, there's something to it already. And so we give feedback like, this part's really good, this part not so much, but here's some suggestions. And then the next time they come back in, it's some completely different, like they tore it down, and it's a completely different game. And I
You don't
sometimes
recognize
feel,
it anymore.
and I feel bad because I like, it was already almost there. You just needed to develop it, not redesign it. And they just, I don't know. I guess they got too in love with the feeling of just new creations, new ideas. So yeah, sometimes I want to tell them like, you were done in the design part. You should have just developed it. So yeah.
and that is, I think, one of the challenges
Mm.
of having both of those roles be the same person,
Yes.
is the temptation, because you know that you are the designer.
Mm.
You you might be very late in the process, and you're getting art and graphic design, and
Mhm.
you're still thinking, oh, it's time for me to design new cards. What if this thing, I swear, if I just changed one more thing, it would be better. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes it is. I think that's its own separate skill of figuring out when to stop, and when to say, you know what, it's not necessarily perfect, but I'm proud of it, and I'm excited about it, and it's time to get it ready to show other people. Because if you've made the world's greatest game, but you can never bear to finish it and put it in front of other people, even if that's just on the internet, and, not necessarily through publication, then no one gets to experience that. And for me, I make games because I want to help people have fun. And if people don't get to play the games that I work on, then I didn't really do my job, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
By the way, John, how before going into um, game development, uh, you said what was your previous job? I mean, how did you? Uh, I know you didn't start out as a game developer. So before game development, what did you do, and how did you sort of transition to game development?
So I was a professional designer before I got into board games. I worked designing retail store experiences, so big demos, installations, sort of interactive experiences between the customers and the employees of stores. Um, and specifically, one of my focuses was field research. So watching customers have experiences within a store, interviewing them, interviewing employees, and then sometimes also testing new experiences within stores and using that to iterate the design of the store. And uh, at the time, I was designing stores for Apple, and they have a rule that you can't work on any digital products outside of work, or anything that's related to Apple's area of business. It's a, they take secrecy and privacy and intellectual property very, very seriously there.
Okay.
And, um, and so while I was working for them, I got permission to work on some board games in my spare time, because that was obviously, Apple would never make a board game. And
Okay.
I'd done a few while I was in school, and nothing serious, nothing I tried to get published. And that started to just be something that I would do on the weekends a little bit. And then they, as part of my research, they moved me internationally and moved me to the UK. And I didn't know anyone who lived in London. I had pretty much no friends other than my coworkers. So I joined some board game meetups just online. I found some, the local community, sort of the equivalent of a LarongAtin there.
Yes.
And uh, that they were really, really welcoming. And that's when I started to take board game design and development more seriously. And
Mhm.
because I was coming from this background of watching customers in a store and using that information, that was a really big benefit for me when I started in the playtesting process. And coming at board game playtesting from that angle of user research, was I sort of quickly realized that the thing I liked the most about making games was watching people play them. And I started work sort of on my own designs, as a sort of just a hobby. And then I signed my first two designs to publishers. And one of the publishers I'd signed a game to said, "Hey, we're working on this other game, and I know you like playtesting. Would you be interested in running playtests and helping us with some development?" And I was like, "Of course, I'd love to work with you more." I was still very early. Like, anytime someone offered to pay me money to work on a board game, I was over the moon, right?
Yes.
Um, and slowly that sort of became a second job. And then it felt a little bit like I was working two jobs, and I wasn't doing great mental health wise, and I was working 7 days a week, and really was burning out and having a lot of trouble, sleeping and other things. And then my mom got sick, and I was really looking for a change in my life where I really loved my job working on stores, but I didn't have any control over my schedule. They could, send me out of the state or out of the country, and that wasn't in my control. I often didn't really feel like I could say no to travel. So having something where I had a flexible schedule where I could spend time with my family became really appealing. So I said, okay, I've saved a little bit of money. I'm going to try doing this board game thing, full time, or at least part time as my only job. And if it all falls apart, I'll go back to working in retail or on installations. And then and that was 2018, and now we're here, and we've got a whole company, and we're doing I want to say 20 games this year total, and it's
Yeah, I could
been a
see
really
your super long list on 2021 alone of games, from Factory Runner, Bear Raid, Ghosts of Christmas, Cartographers, of course. Congratulations on that. I think there's a 2021 um, added thing, an expansion,
yes.
I think, that you're working on.
One of the things as a development studio that my team Brieger Creative does, and I'll put a link here in the chat if people are interested in sort of seeing some of the work that we do.
This is from your website, right? Brickercreative.com.
There you go. Yeah.
But
Yes. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. I will pin
but
that.
one of the things that we specialize in is sort of lines of games and sequels to games, things that fit in a series. And one of the things that I was, I think, very fortunate to get to work on was the game Cartographers from designer Jordi Adan. And that was a game that came to the publisher already a really, really good game. And working with Jordi and working with Keith, who runs Thunderworks Games, helped push that game from good to great. And that has sort of launched a franchise of itself. And so Jordi is, I cannot stress enough, if you ever have a chance to work with Jordi now, incredible designer. And we were not the only people that thought so. And cool mini or not, Simon hired him to be a full-time developer very shortly after he designed Cartographers. And
Okay.
when we went to go work on the sequel, he wasn't available to work on the next game, which was Cartographers Heroes. And so while for the original game I was a developer, for that game I came in as a co-designer and built the new game based off of the systems that he had designed. And
Nice.
That's been a really incredible opportunity for us, and something I'm really, really grateful for. So
Yeah, Cartographers is very popular in the Philippines. Our one of our resident contributors, Denmark, is a big advocate of lockup and cartographers, all of that line. We have a
that
few
makes me happy.
questions. Yes, we have a few questions from the chat. So we have from Clint. What is the most challenging aspect of game development for you? What is the
What
most
is the
challenging
most
aspect of game development?
I I think one of the things that is really the hardest is knowing when you have made a change that's made the game worse. There's such a strong human instinct that when you make a change, you think it makes things better. And if things stayed the same and didn't get any better, but you made the change, that's really hard to identify because your brain wants to say, I did this, so it must be a good decision. And knowing when to say, you know what, that was the wrong decision. It made the game more complicated. It made the game slower. It is difficult, and you have to really be able to take some of your own uh, feelings out of it and really look at how players are responding to things. And that can be really difficult because you're sort of trying to interpret your feelings about the game and players' feelings about the game and your own judgment about what the game should or shouldn't be. And that can be, I think that to me is one of the hardest things, is knowing when to say, you know what, that wasn't the right decision. Let's go back to the way it was before.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that. I don't know. I kind of feel the opposite. In when I add a change to a game, I always feel like, oh no, this might make things worse. I don't know. It's kind of you feel like, oh, they already played the playtester. The playtesters already played this. They already had fun. This is stable, and then I'm adding something new, and like, oh no, it might wreck
It
that
might
balance that's already
mess
there.
everything up again, and
Yeah, I feel, well, personally, I kind of feel the other side of it. Yeah.
okay. Uh, one funny question from Birdie. So he's asking if he can send you a copy of his game. You can
I
answer that.
don't think you want to pay shipping from the
Oh,
Philippines to the United States
Yeah,
these days. Shipping has gotten
it's true.
so expensive.
It
You
is.
know, I wouldn't turn down a game, but the I don't think you want to pay to ship it.
There. So there's your answer, Birdie. I remember I sent a copy of Codes and Verses to Tom Vassell and to uh, Game Boy Geek, and it was pretty expensive to send it over. So next time around, we had Sir Freddy also add more stock so we can send them. And then we have another question from Clint. I see you have developed a few Batman games in your portfolio. Are you a Batman fan, or you had researched it from zero?
I definitely am a Batman fan. I am not a mega fan, I would say. My experiences with Batman come more from the television shows and the movies, all the various incarnations of them, than they come from the comics. And the Batman game that we did as a team was IDW's Batman the Animated Series Adventures. So it was very specifically a TV Batman.
ooh.
So that was nice because I didn't have to go back and read comics I hadn't read. I got sort of the joy of rewatching the animated series again
The best
and
one.
looking at it again for the first time in more than a decade, I think. Um,
Yes.
and we did rewatch. I told all my team, I can't pay you to sit and watch Batman. But what I will say is that if you buy episodes, or you buy a subscription to be able to watch it, I will reimburse you for the money you spent to watch the episodes, even if I can't pay you hourly to just sit and watch Batman cartoons.
You have to watch it off hours.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and
That
fortunately,
was
all of them had also, seen Batman, and one of my developers, Michael Dunsmore, was a huge Batman fan. He was sort of the mega fan on our team, but that's something that was such a joy to work on, just to see the way that the characters were able to come across and sort of representing the spirit of that specific version of Batman. I think the animated series has its own tone and its own flavor for that world, and figuring out what makes that version of Batman special was a really interesting challenge, and something that I
my
was really
most
happy to work on.
memorable of that series is that killer move his opponent can do just by pressing on the chest, and it stops the heart. So super memorable. We have a question here from Birdie. Any advice for that nagging feeling that whatever you try to do, someone already did it?
Yeah.
The Simpsons thing.
Sometimes the feeling is true. I that is something that's hard. But something I think that is important is let you know, I think, oh, you know what, I really want to make a game about birds, and you know, watching birds and looking at them and how birds nest and lay their eggs. And I might go to my local game design group and say, hey, I'm thinking about making this a card game about birds where birds nest and lay their eggs.
Right.
And they say, oh, well, why would you make that? Wingspan already exists.
Yeah.
But the bird game that you make may be very different and is almost certainly going to be extremely different than Wingspan. And it's okay to work on something that is similar to something that exists, as long as you can figure out and players or customers can figure out what makes it different and what makes it special. And you know, there are no shortage of fantasy dungeon crawling games out there, right? And I think people are sometimes scared to say, "Oh, well, my game is sort of like this other game," but as long as you can figure out how to explain to people and people can figure out quickly what's different and what's special about your game, that's not a problem, I think. How to deal with that feeling, I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard. Um,
Uh, I actually have that experience with folded wishes, mainly because the movement of tiles is not unique to me. There was a dungeon, I think, or there's Kodinka also had a similar mechanic. But dungeon is the one where you really are moving tiles, and then it creates a new pathway, and based on that, your wizard can attack another wizard. And so there's a few incarnations of that. That one is almost very similar, except that it has some pegs where you can push the things to. But the way I looked at it was more of like those were critical information for me to see. Like, okay, so how did they do it, and what's the new thing that I'm offering to the table that is a little bit different or something interesting on top of whatever is already there. Because movement, as a game design, you can't stop people from putting cards sideways. It's how cards work, right? I mean, the, that you just can you can brand the name for it, right? And lock that up, but people will just come up with a synonym for it. So
my cards
uh,
aren't tapped; they're exhausted. Okay.
yes, exhausted, bow, and all of these. So I think when you can appreciate, I call them classics. Like, so if you can appreciate your references, and then from there figure out your unique way to attack the same design idea, maybe you might actually come up with something interesting, and interesting enough that, when Sir Freddy were presenting to John and the rest, the games that we had, they were able to pick up my game.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and I'm sure, you know, for Ludus too, you look at all sorts of games that are coming in from inside and from outside the Philippines, and see all sorts of similarities, but that doesn't prevent you from bringing in multiple games that have the same themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like even some games that do have the same very same mechanics but would have different themes would address a different audience, target audience. So as long as you can identify a specific audience for what we're bringing in, or what we're publishing, then it's going to be a go. So I'm going to give that game a go signal. But I'd like to ask a question to Ron and John. uh, since we've already touched on Folded Wishes, when I brought Folded Wishes to the United States and I showed it to you and Floyd, and it was a very, very different game. But from what I understand, that during the development process, there was a lot of back and forth between you and Ron. So I just, which I wasn't really a part of at that point. I'd like to know where Ron and John, uh, in the game Folded Wishes, where Ron ends and where John begins. Is that something that can be answered?
I
Yeah,
could answer that actually
let
too,
me
and we
see if
can
I can share my
you can share a
screen
screen here
too.
actually.
Is
Yes,
is this working? Is it showing?
yes,
Uh,
Uh-huh.
this is the original Folded Wishes.
Uh-huh.
yep. That is the original Folded Wishes.
Yeah, I figured it'd be nice to show this to show, and obviously you have your copy for the actual camera to show, where the game started as we talk about it.
Yes. So in the original design of Folded Wishes, there are only two actions, which is move your unit or move your opponent. And each card, the difference is the amount of that, whether it is multiple move your opponent or multiple of yours. There are some other incarnation in the game where you have these sort of protected tokens, but the goal is the same. So it's still you have to make a line. If you make connect four, you win. And I think the first sort of really what impressed me from John's take on this was he was able. The problem with my original design was this is perfect math. Like if you are bad to at analyzing the situation, uh, and somebody would always be able to who's a little bit better would be able to solve the equation. The next problem is that if you're all good, this is so difficult to
Takes
end.
forever. Yeah.
It takes forever because there is this constant um, race to get those big move cards that give you that advantage. So I think when John compressed those into why don't we not give them all of these skills right away, these abilities right away, and put them first as you have a move or you can move your opponent. That's it. And then eventually you can learn to add those skills onto those tiles. That was for me when I saw that. I was like, right. So now you have this way to sort of introduce this progress of learning the game and teaching like the full on mechanics of the game later on. So for me, that's where the core system of tile and actions ended on my end. And then John's icons in terms of the corner fold, the crumple, the mountain fold and the swap. We were like, I think you first did the
There were a
mountain
lot
fold.
of yeah, I was gonna say there were a lot of steps that went from getting here to getting here.
Right.
And the first versions that we tried uh, for uh, for Folded Wishes were more similar to the original. And one of the things that we saw pretty early, first I started looking at, what are the right combinations of these symbols. One of the things that then we tried was separating. In the original version, you could combine symbols to make a swap,
Yep.
and people were having trouble remembering that you could do that. So we made sort of a swap symbol. We put that on some cards, and then I think the jump was next. At that time, it wasn't yet called Mountain Fold,
Right.
and we had cards that mixed up all of these symbols. And what we were finding was and you can sort of see it a little bit as you look this. This was difficult to figure out, but now it sort of seems more obvious in hindsight. Was the cards ended up a little bit of a soup of all the ingredients were sort of combined all together. And one of the things that I think was the biggest leap in development was switching it so that each tile really only did one thing, right? So if you look at these patterns here in this image, the four different moves each have their own paper texture pattern that's patterned on this really nice origami paper, and switching so that each tile did one thing was a really big change that then also led into the next thing that Ronald was talking about, which was the skills.
Yeah. So when the tiles were now compressed to only be doing one action or one specific purpose, it in terms of the the approachability of the game, from a more chess-like experience, it was able to go forward to a more mass market feel. It is still the same sort of, it's still those simple icons. So if you have lesser icons, it is still mechanically the same effect, except now it's easier to recognize because you're not looking at icons, you can also look at patterns. So this is where John's usability, UX, and observing people skill comes into play, where when he was explaining to me, and here's the uh, idea of the actions and the theme. We can talk about the theme because somebody was asking about the theme later. But mechanics wise, I found it quite impressive too. This is where I felt okay. I have a very precise design, like super distilled, and you somehow found a way to make it simpler, and then eventually add complexity to it and still randomness, which was something as a designer. Um, Sometimes I am personally afraid to add complexity to my game. Like it's already clean. So if I add randomness or things to it, it might mess up the system. But in your case, you were able to sort of find a good balance, um, where you took the original concept, simplified it a bit further, so that you can bring it back in later on in the game.
Yeah. I mean, it did also increase some complexity. I think it probably made the game ages 8+ or 10+ instead of 7+.
Right.
That is a fight I ended up losing with Floyd about the box. He really wanted to put a young age on the box, and I was like, Floyd, I really don't think that Floyd Liu is the publisher of this game. Um, and so I don't win every argument I have as a developer. But I think the new Card Lords edition, which congrats again on getting a second edition. That's
Thank
a
you.
that's
Thank
a
you.
big step. Does have a higher age on it, I believe.
Yes, I think they bumped up the age limit. They fixed up some stuff. So they sort of wanted all animals now. We because it was origami theme, so boat was there, but they wanted more like all animal spirits. So now the boat became a goat.
Yeah,
So still
and
rhymes.
yeah.
But
And someone asked about the theme. So
right.
Floyd Liu from BMP Games, who is a Filipino American publisher, um, he was the one who originally had suggested the theme of origami. His wife is Japanese, uh, and we really liked the idea. One of the things that I think Floyd is really good at as a publisher and as a designer is thinking about the physical nature of a product and a game. And it was his idea to include not just meeples in the box, but pieces of origami paper so that you could fold your own pieces.
Right.
And that was I was sort of so taken by that idea. And then we started looking at the idea that each of the moves in the game is a fold of a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And the name Folded Wishes comes from a story that I really loved about, and I apologize because my Japanese is not very good, but about the concept of a senbazuru, which is the thousand cranes.
Right.
And this is the idea that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your wishes for especially usually health and longevity and a happy life will come true. And so often it's done for weddings or anniversaries or special occasions where you might be wishing a couple health or happiness. Um, and one of the main things that really brought the tradition to the fore was there was a young girl who was dying of radiation poisoning following World War II, and her schoolmates made. She started folding the Thousand Cranes for herself, and died before they were able to finish, I believe. And her schoolmates finished them for her as sort of a memorial, and that sort of It was a pretty not a super well known practice before that, is my understanding, and that sort of catapulted it into the public consciousness. I thought that was a really interesting story about sort of like the labor of folding, and like the love and the care that goes into making, tons and tons and tons of the same object, whether that's
Right.
cranes or board games, or I think anyone who works creatively can feel there is sort of a power in making things. And so that's where the name comes from. I know that's a weird tangent.
But who came up with the meeples? Clint says, "Thank you. Very nice to know." Yes, so this is part of the history of the game. But so this our meeples are actually one of the quite unique looking meeples in the market. When people see this, they're always like, "Oh, it's so cute," because you don't see this often. There are sort of different shaped meeples, thicker meeples, but ours is the first one that did this sort of checkered origami shaped meeples. So who thought about the meeples?
One of the things that was one of the very early discussions that Floyd and I had when we were looking at the theme. The original theme, as I believe it came from you, was space sheep.
Yes,
Amongst other things.
amongst other things.
And we knew it was not going to be space sheep. Our apologies.
It's okay. It's space sheep recovery, because I was a fan of Star Trek Discovery, so it was space sheep recovery. Go ahead. Go on. Go on.
Yeah, and so then I think at the time that Freddie showed it to us, we did. He had maybe already mentioned the idea of ducks in a row, and potentially
Right.
that they would be little ducks on a pond. And Floyd had thought he thinking again about the origami thing, which he hadn't come up with yet. He knew that he wanted to have some really nice piece that sat on the board, and so we were thinking a lot about what would sit on top of these tiles that would be not too expensive to make. And for a while we looked very seriously at doing a dog show theme, so that these are maybe like a little jump on a hurdle, and like maybe a little pillow that your dog has to sit on, or like the little tunnel that they run through, and then they would all be little different wooden dogs in
Ooh,
different breeds.
I would like that too.
That was I think the top contender until the origami theme, and then I think we all sort of fell in love with that one.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
And it's quite unique. Not a lot of origami theme games, so that's yeah. Thanks to Floyd for coming up with the theme, and of course John to sort of like making it gel, making a cohesive idea from space. I think you also saw the turtles and the ducks, but
Yeah.
it was a before it didn't have icons. It was words because it was an AI waking up. The original game was an AI waking up, and you have
I didn't even see that version.
yeah. So you didn't see that one because it was the idea was you are installing nodes to figure out where the AI is, and whoever the hacker group that can control the AI wins because you were able to isolate, where she is. And the commands are words because it's like programmer words like push, pop, alert, and stuff like that. So those are the original ones. Of course, it eventually evolved. Bless you. And so it's cool. People, it's also interesting to for people that saw the original and saw like the new game, and I feel that they're all already of the same ancestry, but already are like they feel a little bit different. They would play differently, and um, I'm interested to see if there would be other incarnations of this game in the future.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the future, what are the current games that people would be that should be excited about on things that should look forward to from Brigger Creative?
Just released here in the States, and if you were a Kickstarter backer, should have shipped in the Philippines as well, is Kabuto Sumo from BoardGameTables.com. And this is a lovely physics game played on a sort of elevated table. And let me see, actually, I might be able to
Maybe you can. Do you have
pull up a picture.
something to share?
Yeah. Um,
Meanwhile, while sharing, everyone who has asked comments, I will be capturing your names already so we can roll.
and hopefully this is showing.
I will show that. Okay, there.
So this is played on a sort of elevated cardboard table, and the table's filled with discs, and you slowly push a piece in, and similar in some ways to Folded Wishes, you have a supply of pieces in front of you, and whatever falls out is then added to your supply. So that if you push out one of these larger discs, then you have something larger to push next time.
Mm-hmm.
And you are wrestling, and the goal is to push your opponent's beetle off of the edge.
Oh,
That's so cool. It's like the coin arcade game.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was the
reminds me
inspiration.
of.
Yeah.
So this is designed by Tony Miller, and his inspiration was the coin arcade games. And
Oh, okay.
and we love this game. It's like nothing I've ever gotten a chance to work on. It's really interesting challenges in terms of production and designing the pieces, thinking about the size of these things, how they're cut, how they're painted. And one of the things similar to the development on Folded Wishes, it came in with very abstract. It was all circles. The game was very themeless. And though he did already have the idea of it being about sumo wrestling insects, this is really something that beetles do where they challenge each other on a log.
right.
And we were, as developers, able to work on adding custom shapes into the game. And we cut hundreds and hundreds, this is just one test round, of different types of insects and beetles to make the final set of signature pieces that all of these different wrestlers get to use, and adding some sort of special powers and new physics, because these pieces push and interact in that ring very differently than a circle does. So this is our latest release. We have a number coming through the next couple months, but I am hoping if you are in the Philippines and back this, because I know we had some backers, I hope you have received your copy and that you enjoy.
Super cute. I like the Beatles, the sumo Beatles with their sumo official belt.
Yeah.
It's super cute. Cool.
And not yet signed to a publisher, but in the works is I do have a new game with a Filipino artist that we're working on right now that I don't have art yet to show, but I just sort of finalized discussions with them, and that is Enemies to Lovers, and it's a game. I'm really interested in how to tell stories through games that aren't traditionally told in games, and that the story of sort of two rivals who fight, a series of duels or battles over time and slowly fall in love is something that you see in movies and in books.
Right.
And I was interested in trying to capture that through a game. So it's a 2-player dueling game where you can win by winning enough battles against your opponent. But if there's a tie, you have a little romance track that goes up. And if the romance track gets high enough, the game becomes a cooperative game, and you unite against the world, and you can win cooperatively.
Oh, that's a very interesting concept.
Very unique.
And I'm also it's also a chance for me to work with one of my favorite artists, Caleb Hosala, whose work I will try to pull up on the screen really quickly. Um, and Caleb primarily works in comics, and I was super lucky to sort of pitch him the concept for doing the art for this game, and I think he's got a really wonderful style that's really bright and really colorful, and I'm
And
really excited to
those
see where this project
are
goes. This
actually
is not art
wearing.
for my project. This is
Mhm.
other art, but
Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 So, but his art style um, shows a lot of the Filipino traditional um,
Mhm.
apparel wear. So the textiles that are being shown here are
Mm.
the traditional Filipino garb.
I'm guessing that's supposed to be Howl, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
um,
All right. There's just some last question I think I wasn't able to pick up, which is from Clint. When you develop historically themed games like Rurik, Dawn of Kiev, do you go for historical accuracy or coolness?
why not both?
Mhm.
Why not both? For Rurik, that was one of my favorite projects to work on, and because we did really go very deep into the history, and our approach for history in Rurik specifically, and that's not necessarily the approach I take with every historical game, was the idea that it was a historical fiction. So all of the characters and the events are real that form the basis of the game, but the story that is made through play is not necessarily mirroring the story of how events really played out. So a good example of this is we have in the base game of Rurik, there are 8 playable characters, and 3 of them are women. And traditionally, the women were not eligible to inherit the throne of Kievan Rus, the empire that you're vying for control of. But all of the and so they would not necessarily have been leading troops in battle. But that doesn't mean that they weren't politically important in the region at the time. And something that we have to look at, especially when we look at historically themed games, is there is bias in the way that histories are written and the way that histories are recorded. And so the fact that our primary sources for the time, in this case, it's something called the Primary Chronicle, which we did quite a lot of research on, don't mention a lot of the deeds or the accomplishments of these princesses, doesn't mean that they weren't influential. And you can, if you are looking at the scholarship, sort of read between the lines and see some of the ways that they influence the course of politics. But I think it's a mistake to assume that because that this is the primary most important record, and it doesn't mention them, that they weren't important or influential, because every piece of history is written with a specific point of view by its writers, and even when people are trying to be objective, they're still coming from a specific culture and moment in time when they're writing that work. So we did end up making them playable characters. But something, on the other side is all of the characters in Rurik are siblings. This was a real thing that happened. Vladimir dies, and his children fight a war, brother against brother, for the throne for decades. And it was important to us that that relationship be preserved, and so we didn't extend the cast of characters to non-siblings within the time period, even though we could have. There were other relevant people, because we thought that was thematically important to the story of history that we were trying to tell. So we did quite a lot of research. I know way more, facts about medieval Ukraine than I ever would have thought now, but it was really really interesting, and that's something that I think I learned a lot about the process to of just how to find the documents that I needed. A lot of that history is written in Russian, and I do not speak
Wow.
it. And so trying to figure out where I could find the right translations of things and similar, was
Do you actually try to get like subject matter experts or like people that you can be like your resource or historians, especially for this type of topic?
yeah. We often do. At the time when I was working on Rurik, that was not something that the studio had as a practice. That was a pretty early in my development career. Now we do much more of that.
Mm.
So we have an upcoming game uh, whose name I can't say, but it
Okay.
is history. It is a general history themed, and for that game, we the publisher did hire a historical consultant who helps select some of the historical events to highlight and is writing a lot of the historical blurbs.
Nice.
The other thing that we do commonly is now is cultural consultants for games that are rooted in specific
Right.
cultures, for especially where our team is not from that area or intimately familiar with it. So Rurik, as an example, the designer is Russian and the artist is Ukrainian and had a very deep knowledge of the culture already. So
Mhm.
we didn't do that for Rurik,
Mhm.
but for other upcoming games, I'm working on a game that is based in Irish mythology. That's something where we want to consult with someone who really understands that material at a deep level.
Okay. Cool. 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 All right. So we are about to end the show. I've already collected most of the names. For anybody else who are still watching, just add a comment or hashtag folded wishes or hashtag Brigger Creative, and I will give them maybe like good 2 minutes, and then I will pick up the names and we will raffle out the game. Um, so off question: if you're not playing board games, what are you? What do you play?
I'm not playing board games. What do I play? Um, I play video games periodically. I go in and out in phases. So, um, last year I went through a very intense phase where I was playing the game Hades a lot.
Oh, same,
Nice,
same.
nice.
That was probably my favorite release last year.
Oh yeah.
And recently I've been playing Deathloop. I love time loops, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's been really fun to explore. Um, I also occasionally play role playing games and story games, and especially I like again I like games that sort of tell non traditional stories. So I generally play less sort of campaign D&D style games and more one shot single
Right.
experiences that are designed to capture some specific emotion or theme.
Yeah. We guested Bianca. Um, she has a um, brand called Momentos, and she did the Kickstarter for Arc. And it was a one-shot RPG. Basically, um, the she was able to sort of incorporate like a board game feel to an RPG in the sense that there's physicality with the time. There, you set the time, and that's when the world will end, and you guys are just going through. So every time the clock, let's say every 15 minutes, then something will trigger and so forth. And that's how the amount of resources you have in the game, which is the physical time. So it's at least an RPG. You can say, I'm going to play an RPG in an hour. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
It will now fit. Cool.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
know the Philippines does have sort of its own RPG design community, which I don't know how intersecting that is with the board game design community. But I have heard more in the last 2 3 years about
yeah.
new RPGs coming out of the Philippines as well.
Yeah. Sinauna, there's quite a lot now.
Yeah.
Both D&D storyline sort of content, and also like its own D&D sort of RPG systems.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Filipino creative writers, and I think
Yeah.
it's also pretty interesting how they're also mixing with mechanics that are seen mostly um, on board games. So we have two follow-up questions here. Um, any game you're working on that you could spoil? It was the
Um, let me just turn around. I can look at my shelf of
oh cool
um,
designer preview.
um, one something that I can. So I guess the question is, do we want like a real spoiler, or do we want something I can talk about all the way?
You can of course talk about the something you're safe to talk about.
Um, so I guess the real spoiler that I can't say what the game is the studio is doing two games right now with Richard Garfield, the designer of Magic the Gathering, um, which I'm very
Wow.
excited about.
Mhm.
One of which is more of a mass market game, and one of which is more of a hobby game. Neither of them are battling card games; they're both board games.
Mhm.
Oh, nice,
Um,
nice, nice.
but
Very
unfortunately, I can't tell you what the titles or themes of
okay.
those are
That is
yet.
you
um,
already said more than enough. So now we can say in the same sentence: designer Richard Garfield, developer John Brieger. Perfect.
yeah, I don't
That
think my
is
name. I don't think like if Richard Garfield's up here, I'm like down below the floor.
with the list of developers. Is that how it works?
Um, but
Okay.
and then things I can talk about that's coming soon is pulled out my headset here. Uh, Floor plan Winchester Mystery House.
Ooh, yes, I saw this.
And this is something talk about working locally and about themes that are important to you. The Winchester Mystery House is this incredible local piece of culture here in California. I live just a couple miles away, and the story goes that Sarah Pardee Winchester marries William Winchester, who's the heir to the Winchester rifle fortune. This is an enormous firearms and gun manufacturer in the United States in the 1800s. And he dies very young, and she is left as a young woman with a tremendous amount of wealth, and moves to California as a widow and begins constructing this home. And as sort of happens for a young wealthy woman at the time who is unmarried, and a lot of rumors spring up about her, and she's very into this is the time of the big growth of spiritualism and sort of like non-Christian communication with the spirits and the afterlife in the United States. This is sort of the peak time, and people began to believe that she was maybe building the house to confuse the spirits of all the people that her husband's rifles killed. And the house has all these twists and turns. It's sort of like a maze inside. There's doors that open into nowhere, staircases that lead into the ceiling. And I don't know that I 100% believe all of the stories about the ghosts and the spirits, but she was an incredible designer. The house is beautiful and filled with all these amazing features that she added into it, and it is certainly large and maze-like. And for me, this was a really cool opportunity to work on a game that's really directly inspired by something local to me. And it is a sequel to Floor Plan, which is a published roll and write game that I
Right.
served as a developer on, and now I'm getting to serve as a designer on this sequel for Winchester Mystery House.
Nice. Did you actually go ocular visit? Like you had to go there on site?
Yeah, so I've been a couple times. I grew up going there,
Okay.
and recently on Friday the 13th for August, we got to go on site with demos of the game, and we had local press and some local designers come.
Nice.
We got to play the game in the house, and then we could take a nighttime tour all together, which was really fun.
Cool, 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 cool. Okay, so there I think that was even um more than what we bargained for. So those are super cool previews. Okay, so we have, I think, most of the names. Um, so let me just share the window. Okay. All right. Let me just double check if I missed anyone.
Yeah, just to
Okay.
let you know of a story. Uh, when I saw your post about the Winchester Mansion game, I shared that with in my group chat with the Ron and Nico, and then I gave them the story about the Winchester Mansion, because that story was something that kept, was always playing in my head when I was a kid. I watched it on TV, and I thought it was such an interesting story.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I really like, and I encourage, if you're a designer and you're watching this, um, something that I think can help games is being really specific. It's not a haunted mansion game; it's the Winchester Mystery House, and finding some element of that's local to you or that you're passionate about that's specific can really help elevate a game and take it somewhere that you didn't think was possible.
All right. So I think I have the complete list.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now gonna roll. This is not. Do we have representatives from? Okay. So
Okay.
rolling. We'll see who wins the copy of Folded Wishes. And it's
Oh,
Clint, which I know already has a copy. So uh, I'm gonna add another one um, to the mix. So Sir Freddy from my stash.
He
Okay.
can he can gift it.
Yes. And there you go. Melvin. Congratulations, Melvin. All right. Okay. So Melvin and Clint, just message us in Variable Play or LarongAtin, and we will get you your copies of Folded Wishes. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying with us. An hour 20 minutes. And again, thank you, John, for waking up super early for us. Um, and we're glad that time slot uh, worked now, and it's super enlightening to see the sort of like a bigger um, perspective of how the game design goes. I mean, to us, we just see it sort of like this compressed view, but it is, of course, as the industry is bigger in the states, there are also more components, more people that interact, more people involved, more layers towards getting the idea to something that is published. And again, I'm always grateful for your guidance with this and patience. For me, when I was learning how to sort of get this game to something that's on the table. But we are all looking forward to your creations, your design, as well as things that you have developed. Um, and hopefully, don't be a stranger. If you want to just drop by and hang out, we can always jump on a stream for you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Any things that you want people to sort of follow? Instagram, Facebook.
Um, yeah, I mean, if people are interested in sort of following along with our development work, we have a Facebook page for the studio that is not particularly active. but it's the Brieger Creative is the name of the company.
Mhm.
And of course, you can check out our work on our website, briegercreative.com. If you are a designer and you ever want advice or to talk about what development is, or maybe you want to try being a developer and you're not sure how, there is a contact form on my website. I can't guarantee that I will spend a huge time writing an article, but I do try to answer every single thing that comes in. So
Wow. So there you guys have it. So if you have questions and things pop up, feel free to message John, and he will try his best to answer you amongst his busy schedule.
Mhm.
So super thank you everyone for joining us. This is LarongAtin, part of Variable Play. We have a lot of shows throughout the week. So tomorrow we will have the open game night with the rest of the Variable Play crew. And of course, during weekends, you have the solo board gamers, uh, Philippines, headed by Clint and his crew, and they would also be talking about games. And then, of course, you can also see me on Sunday morning, where I try to mix game design and fitness. I don't know if you've seen that, John.
I have not,
Don't.
but I'm gonna tune in now.
Where I would quickly design a game and then put the fitness twist to it. It's my way to make myself move. Um,
I
so
could use a little more of that. So
all right. So thank you everyone, and of course, Sunday Night Magic from Javi, and actually, there's quite a lot of shows. Normally, Denmark is with me. He has the complete lists. There's G's at the table, Pilipintados, our partner group that does miniature paintings, and Denmark and his wife for their from the Meeple's Mouth. All right, and Monkey Place and Ivan's Cardboard Bus. There's quite a bit.
that's a lot
So
of content.
yes, so there's a lot of contributors, and hopefully and Morgan, G's at the table. I started to say that. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is Variable Play and Larong Atin. Until next time, see you guys next
Bye.
month. Every start of the month for Larong Atin. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night or
Bye.
good
Night.
morning.